Does your wife come to these events sometimes?
Sorry, I had a really bad no, she's in software, not in energy as much. No, I'm fine. I just was trying to, I have to meet up this morning. I don't know what it is. Anyway, yeah, it'll be fine. I'm just trying to explain.
So she's in soccer, so she doesn't usually.
Yeah, but she's interested in things.
Nobody going to say.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Happy Almost Earth Day. So, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Yes, it's an intimate group tonight, so we'll stay close and keep the conversation going. My name is Ravi Mikkelsen. I've been organizing these events for a bit over a year now. I've got Francis and Jason along with me, and beyond San Francisco, the founder of the Clean Web, whose mission it is to close the funding gap for early stage clean tech companies. And we need that because we're in a climate crisis, and as former Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz says, if we don't get innovation going, there's a lot of deployment around here. But if we don't also have innovation on clean technologies, we're not going to stay under our 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise. And without capital, we're not going to see that innovation happen. So far this year, there's been just over $11 billion invested into clean tech startups. And as you can see, only just over 1% has gone to seed stage companies. All the rest, and this seed phase, whatever you want to call it, whatever the name is changing now, we need more of it. And it's primarily a network disconnect. It's like, well, just go on AngelList, that's where all the investors are. Well, here's all the investors, and this is what they're investing in. It's not clean tech. And if you want to find, almost half of the investors on AngelList say that they're interested in investing in clean tech, but most of them aren't actually putting any money. They're just interested in it from a personal perspective. So you have to spend a lot of time talking to the ones who aren't investing, but say they're investing, before you find the ones who actually are. So the Clean Web is a combination of online network with physical meetups to build community, recruit people into the clean tech sector. So how many people are in tech but not in clean tech sustainability? I know we've got 1, 2, a couple more, 3-ish, 4. Okay. So these are a great way, these physical meetups are a great way to bring people into building things that really matter. So instead of just working on distraction tech and clicking on ads, we can get them to solving the climate challenge. So we're just launching right now, thecleanweb.org. You can go sign up and say that you're looking for money, you're looking for a job, you're hiring for jobs, or you're investing in startups. And we're building out the recommendation engines to match up all the people together that want to talk to each other. So if you want to get involved, build cool tech, there's a hackathon coming up this Friday, Saturday that we're partnered with. Submit topics and speakers to present at our CleanWeb SF events. Go to thecleanweb.org and join and start interacting with the community. Share these meetups. We've got a Slack channel, so all the amazing conversation you're going to have tonight, you can continue it with each other on Slack and other people. And as always, you can send me emails, which I will probably read at some point, and I may respond at some later point. But you're not here to see me. We've got 2 awesome presentations tonight. So the first, Lisa Altieri from Climate Solutions Net is going to talk. Hold on, got a great speaker intro here. Oh, it didn't sync. So, ad lib. So she is the founder and CEO of Climate Solutions Net, which is a behavior technology. Oh, she will explain it much better than I am, and I'm not going to butcher it. But she's got a master's in environmental economics and development and management, and has spent her time in data analysis and management consultation, and was an organizer, regional field organizer for one of the Obama campaigns. So she will be presenting on climate solutions next. And next, after her, we also have Laura Hanscom from the Global Footprint Network, and she is the program director and also a research scientist. And as such, she's constantly trying to find new methodologies to add to their footprint calculator, and new ways to apply that to get people to act. I forgot the interesting tidbit at the end. Okay.
I'm impressed.
Well,
I saw the cover. I'm impressed.
So yeah, I saw it earlier, copied it earlier today, but I didn't get it on my phone. Well, anyway, please welcome Lisa Altieri. Can everyone hear her okay?
I don't know.
This is not working quite yet. I see it advancing on the screen, but it's not doing it up there. So I'm seeing this way. Is there a trick?
Wow. Come on, Microsoft. Who uses Microsoft on a regular basis? Who thinks they can troubleshoot this? Anyone?
Not it.
Bueller?
Let's check it out. Oh, yeah.
Maybe this thing's not working. Or you just used it.
Yeah, it worked.
Well, it's the same color.
It looks like it.
So this is forward and back.
Yeah.
So when I hit this to advance forward, this advances
Oh.
There we go. All right. You just have to keep clicking on things. Gorilla Smash.
Cool. So hi, I'm Lisa Altieri, the founder of Climate Solutions Net, and we're working on driving engagement on climate solutions. With the can you hear me okay?
It's a little quiet.
Or is it-
It's a little quiet.
Yeah.
Is it quiet?
Yeah.
Maybe I should- Is that better? No. Is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. I can also talk really loud.
That works. We can hear you.
Both?
No.
Yeah, me talking really loud? I have a really soft voice. So with the administration's backwards movement on the Paris Agreement and climate in general, and with climate policy far behind science-based goals, both here in the US and beyond, we need to find new and innovative ways to move climate solutions forward. But there's good news. There are some real opportunities for us to do that. In addition to policy work. Policy work is still good. We all need to be still working on that. But there are some additional ways that we can look to move climate solutions forward that don't rely on policy. There are actually 5 actions that most people can take to lower their direct impact 70 to 100% on climate. here in the US and beyond. If everyone took these 5 actions here in the US, we would lower individual actions that affect your direct impact. Things like electricity use, natural gas. We're not talking about carbon embedded in purchasing and services. We're talking about more your direct impact from your actions. So the question is, does someone want to take a stab at guessing at what a couple of these 5 actions are? Anybody?
Not riding a car, driving a car.
Okay, ditching your car. That's half of one. That's exactly it. Let's see what could be the other half of ditching your car. What would be another transportation option?
Bicycling?
Public transport,
Cycling?
So public transport, biking, all that is one half of it. What's the other half of? What else could you do to ditch the gas pump? Exactly. Awesome. What's another one?
Vegetarian or vegan, or reduce your meat intake.
Exactly. That's 2. Any other ideas? Any other thoughts? Got 3 more.
Reduce waste. Reduce waste.
That's number 6. It didn't make it into the top 5. We decided 5 was a good number for people. So that actually is number 6.
recycle, reuse, compost.
Yes, that's number 6. Awesome. Okay. Any other ideas?
Divest.
That is an awesome one. That is actually, we're focusing on individual actions folks can take, so that's like an excellent one to push institutions, but it's not on the list of direct impact.
Is it home insulation and thermal controls?
No, but
Don't fly.
Solar panels on your roof.
there you go. There you go. Awesome. Okay. So the solutions pathway to get us off fossil fuels is 3 simple steps. Number 1, you make your electricity renewable, 100% renewable. Second, you start using electricity for everything. You use it for your transportation and you use it for your heating. So you get off the gas pump and you get off your natural gas heating. That is what we call fuel switching. And the third step is just to be energy efficient and energy smart along the way to reduce the overall amount of energy we use and to help lower emissions as we transition to an all 100% renewable electric infrastructure. That's the pathway. That covers the majority of our fossil fuel use. There are some exceptions to that, like ships and air travel and long-range trucking, but some really smart people are working on some options for that. So, but from an individual personal standpoint, those 3 steps will bring an individual off of fossil fuels for their direct impact, not counting embedded carbon purchasing and services. The other 2, so the 4 of the steps, the first one is choose green electricity. That could be putting solar panels on your roof. It could also be choosing a green electricity product through your utility or through some other third-party method. The second one is greening your transportation. So getting off fossil fuels for your transportation. So that can be doing an electric vehicle. If you have green electricity at home, then your electric vehicle is 100% carbon free. The other option is alternative transportation. The third one is, once you have renewable electricity coming into your house, fuel switching your home, going electric with your heating, water heating, your appliances. That's installing heat pump water heater and space heating technology, which is highly efficient, and then also choosing electric appliances for cooking and for your dryer. The fourth one is offsetting or reducing your air travel. So reducing if you can. If you have to travel, consider offsetting until they come up with really good solutions on how to find alternatives to fossil fuels for air travel or decarbonize. And then the final one is, as you mentioned, eating less red meat. Those are the 5 big actions. If you do those 5 actions, you will reduce your direct impact on carbon 70 to 100%. So individual actions can drive deep decarbonization. The good news, this is the second good news, there's a lot of traction and there's a lot of interest in this. So Yale studies have shown that the majority of Americans believe climate change is happening and they're worried about it. They want to help, they're willing to help, but they don't know what to do. And then cities, particularly in the last year, since the administration bailed on the Paris Agreement, cities are stepping up and they're setting bold goals on climate change. But the problem is at the city level, there are limited policy options for cities to actually reach deep decarbonization goals. However, up to 50% or more of the city's emissions come from the choices that residents make. So whether the residents are choosing EVs or Hummers, whether they're choosing heat pump water heaters and electrifying their house, or whether they're choosing gas or fuel oil water heaters, those choices actually drive the city's emissions. So one of the biggest opportunities for cities to decarbonize is actually to engage residents, bring residents into the conversation, help them understand what choices they can make to help community meet goals, and then engage them and help them with resources. So this is an opportunity. It's a big opportunity. There's a lot of interest and there's a lot of momentum around this. The best news is that when you do those 5 actions, you can actually save money. So this is not a situation where it's going to be extremely expensive for folks. It's actually going to save most households a significant amount of money over time. So the question is how do we actually engage people? Robbie, is this working?
Yes.
Okay, all right. It's hard to tell.
As long as you just point it like that.
Okay. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we engage people? I spent 5 years volunteering for an effort in my own city in Palo Alto where the city asked for volunteers to help engage residents around climate solutions. They wanted to help get the community involved. And so I stepped up and said, okay, I did some organizing for the Obama campaign. And I thought, okay, well, I've done that, I can do that. So I volunteered and I worked for 5 years with other volunteers in the community to get people who lived in my city to take individual actions to lower their impact. It was a 5-year pilot project. We had no budget, we were all volunteers, and we tried just about everything we could think of to try. And we had a lot of fun. And we managed to discover some real lessons around what actually worked. And what we found that worked were 2 things. First, information. So folks want to help, but they don't know what to do. So providing folks really easy to follow information on what the solutions are, what their impact looks like, what does my footprint look like, where does it come from, and then providing them a list of actions that they can take, and then also information on that action, like how does that action work, what can they do, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, is there a rebate, is there a financing resource, what resources are available for that action. So that was really important. We found that to be a required piece of the puzzle, but it was not sufficient. So if any of you have worked on engagement, you'll find that handing someone a piece of information is not actually usually get them to do anything. So you hand them a flyer, it's got great information on it, they'll look at it and say, oh yeah, I want to do that. And then the phone will ring, right? And they'll put it down, and they'll go answer the phone, and it'll be kind of all over at that point. So information is not sufficient. However, when you pair that with social engagement, you can find traction. So what we found is when we started to get people to talk with each other, when they started talking with their neighbors and chatting about what actions they were going to do, and they started sharing ideas and resources, and then we started to get them working in teams, and we added a little friendly competition, like even some neighborhood competitions, suddenly we saw traction. So people wanted to engage, and they were likely to get involved if somebody they knew brought them in. Hey, check this out, or come to this meeting, join our team, or hey, let's get our neighborhood together and let's win this competition. So what we found was that community-based social engagement paired with climate information was really powerful. You want to make it social, you want to make it local, so you're connecting folks with each other, you want to make it easy, and you want to make it fun. So we found that that worked, but our problem was we were volunteers and we were having a really hard time scaling what we were doing. So it was our biggest barrier to a really successful program was actually scaling it. And so what we started to look at was what was working, what wasn't working, and what would it take to really scale this. And what we came up with was if we built a platform to do a lot of the engagement, provide the information, we could use that platform as a tool to run the program, then we could really have a robust community program. So that's actually when Climate Solutions Net was born. We decided to go ahead and build this platform and create a tool to allow communities across the US and beyond engage residents in a robust, time-effective, and cost-effective way to start to really move community efforts forward on climate solutions. So this is the platform. I'm going to just walk through it quickly. So this is the city of Fremont. So we have our city platform up and running right now. We're working with 17 cities already, and just since we launched last, they've got some students teams engaging. They've got a competition. They have 15 student teams. The team that signs up the most household gets Tesla jackets and an acknowledgement from the mayor, so they're all very excited. And so they signed up almost 700 homes in the last couple of weeks. So the way it works is when we set up a city, they get a custom logo. So you see the logo up here, custom logo, custom photos. It's a photo of the beautiful Fremont Baylands. And they can put in taglines so they can brand it and make it comfortable for their residents. And then the first thing they do when folks sign up is we ask them a few questions about what they're currently doing, and then we show them what their impact looks like. So real education moment, they're like, oh, wait a minute, oh, that's where it's coming from. Wait, look at that vehicle thing. That's not good. So, and then we track, in our metrics, we track 6 categories. You see electricity, natural gas, vehicles, airline travel, and then food, specifically red meat or ruminants, and waste. So the last one is kind of a methane category. And then we take those 6 categories and we say, okay, what does that look like in an average impact per person for those categories in the US, the UK, China, and India? So we educate, we help folks understand the relative impact that we have here in the US. And then once they fill that out and they find out their impact, we take them to an action grid. So we have just under 70 actions on the site. If they filled out their their energy questions, then the points and savings are actually custom to their household. And then they can easily just tag each one. They can go through and select whether they want to do it, they don't want to do it, they did it before they signed up. And excuse me. And then each action has a page of information. Sorry, hold on. Excuse me. So we have very robust analytics on the site. We have a background carbon calculator and savings, carbon and savings calculator. So here, they can answer a question. They can say how many light bulbs they're going to change. They immediately see their energy or water savings associated with that action. And then they see how much they're going to save annually on their bill. So $110 for this particular action, given excuse me, their parameters. And then we give them points. So people like points. That's fun. But the points are actually equal to 1 pound of CO2 reduced per year or 10 gallons of water. So they're meaningful. And when we set up a city, we put in metrics. So we put in the utility carbon intensity, local energy average pricing, and climate data. So all of this actually runs based on local parameters. They're meaningful metrics. They're custom to the household. We bring in the household energy profile information. So all of this is really custom for the user. As close as we can get without going into their home and actually starting to measure things. And then we hook them up with information and resources. So here we do a quick overview. What is the action? What am I doing? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Do I want to keep reading? And then we immediately then hook them up with resources. So rebates, credits, financing, community programs, information like how-to guides, anything that's going to help them complete that action. And we actually take the time to make those links really user-friendly. A lot of times people will find a rebate program and they'll go to the website and they'll have to spend an hour trying to figure out how do I even start with this rebate or this credit. It's really, sometimes really complicated. So we take the time to break it down and provide them information in a way that's really actionable. And what we're working on now is adding in a marketplace. So here they're going to be able to click and go find the products or the services that they need to complete that action. So whether that's a light bulb or whether that's a solar contractor or someone who knows how to install a heat pump water heater, which is actually a rare thing, we're going to be able to hook them up with that. And then finally we answer the top 3 or 4 questions that folks have. We provide them a checklist and help them feel comfortable. And then they can chat about the action. So we have an action discussion for each of the actions where folks can chat with each other. And this is actually really important in encouraging action because a lot of the actions that we have right now are new. So it's EVs, heat pump water heaters, smart power strips, home batteries. These are things that are new and they're unfamiliar to people. So if you give them a chance to chat with each other, they can go to this page and they can see, oh, my neighbors are talking about this. Oh, wait, there's this tip. My neighbor posted a tip and that's really helpful. Or you can talk about a contractor you liked, or you can tell a story of your experience around action. So this provides some context and a way for folks to start to feel comfortable with those actions. And then all the actions that they've chosen to do, they see they have a list here, they have their plan. And when they add an action to their plan, they actually we ask them to give themselves a goal. So they set themselves a goal or a due date of when they want to have it finished. That lets us do push notifications and interact with them and encourage them on. And then at the top here, as they add actions to their plan, we give them immediate feedback and tell them how much they're going to save per year and how much they're going to reduce their impact if they complete those actions. And then we also track their progress to what they've completed. So anything they've marked done, they see their points, their savings, how they see their household impact go down. I need a laser pointer.
Should be the top button on the slide advance.
Oh, seriously?
The red.
Oh, cool. Well, that works. Okay. So here, they can see their household footprint go down. They can see we started here, now we're here. And this is where we bring in the social part of it. So there's the power phenomenon, right? Everyone wants to be ranked to their neighbors. So when we did user testing, this was the #1 request. I want to be ranked to my neighbors. So here, when we set up a city, we put in an average household, and then we benchmark everyone to that. So as they go below the average household, then they go up in level. So this allows folks that have done a lot already to come in, and they can come in at a rock star level, and because they're not going to be able to get a lot of points because they've done a lot of things already, but they'll be able to come in at a high level, and the folks on the ground running the program can actually acknowledge them for what they've done. And this gets local leaders engaged and on board and get them to invite all their friends. So, and then here, there's 3 different ways for folks to work together: team, community group, and neighborhood. Teams are small groups, up to 10 households, and they get their own dashboard to track progress, chat with each other, see what each other's up to, and we have a whole team module around that. Small teams are extremely effective at moving behavior change forward. And then they can tag their points to a community group. It could be a school, it could be a faith community, it could be a senior group, whatever's in the neighborhood, or whatever's in the community. And then we have a neighborhood group too. And that lets us do a leaderboard. So here you can see community level accomplishments. And then we have a leaderboard to track teams, community groups, and neighborhoods. So that lets, again, folks on the ground running the program can run challenges and acknowledge people for their progress. And then finally, when folks complete an action, we encourage them to post a photo, and they can share that out with their groups. Sharing is opt-in. We're very careful about privacy, so they can decide if they want to share that or not. They can also post all this stuff out to Facebook or Snapchat or whatever else they're doing. The tech. It's a content management system. It's white labeled and mobile responsive. We're going to be adding an app later this year. And we have a custom backend carbon and savings calculator in PHP run on MySQL database, and we can integrate utility data wherever we can. For here in the PG territory, we have a link where we're asking folks their energy profile questions. When they get to the utility side, they just push a button, give their permission, and we get their utility data in the backend. So we make it as easy as possible for people to answer these questions and provide information to let us provide them with some good metrics and good information on the actions. So we have our city version live. We're right now working on a version that can also work with companies and large organizations like large nonprofits, and that's coming very soon. We have, as I mentioned, 17 cities and counties from Hawaii to Virginia that we're already working with that are most are launching on Earth Day, and we have a very long list of additional cities that are very interested that we're talking with. So for us, our goal is to rapidly and broadly raise awareness about solutions and get people engaged, and get people on board and taking action as quickly as possible across the U.S. and beyond. And the last thing I'll say is that we're actually looking to expand our team. We're looking for a software engineering team lead, and we're also looking for some help with data analytics. So if anyone's interested, or there's something else that you do and you're inspired by the project, please contact me and let me know, or talk to me.
Q&A?
Do we have time? I wasn't sure. I was watching the clock. Awesome. Cool. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, how do you set goals for users? So like if you have like, I think your example was like 10 was like the carbon footprint and the goal was 1. Like how do you set a goal so it's back even further? It's like I think your first.
So that's a really good question. The goals are actually something that we haven't refined yet. Mm-hmm. Right now they just sort of bump up as you go along, but we're working on a strategy on how to set those goals and actually engage the user around setting the goals.
Yeah.
So actually what you're seeing here is our MVP, and which has been bootstrapped. And we have a whole bunch of additional things that we're going to be doing to enhance the platform. A lot of it bringing in some more interaction with the user, more sort of predictive analytics and things like that to sort of set goals in a way that makes sense for that household and for their specific goals. That's coming. So yeah.
So when you go to a city, it seems like they already need to know a lot of information about their average household or whatever, or is that something you help them calculate?
So most of the cities that we're working with are cities that have climate action plans and they have climate goals, and so they've actually done that analysis. So usually the primary process for a city that gets engaged around climate goals is to do something called a climate action plan, and they usually hire a consultant and they come in and do a baseline measurement of the climate emissions for that city, and they look at those categories: transportation, waste, and home energy or heating, basically natural gas, electricity, and waste, and transportation are the main categories they look at. So they usually have in their climate action plan information on an average household use for electricity and natural gas. But if they don't, there's also some studies out there that have been done. Cameron and Jones have done a few studies on households. They do it by zip code. We also have the REX data set that we use a lot. So the EIA has a data set for residential energy consumption, and they do it every 5 years. The 2009 one is out, and the 2015 one is just about to be released. It's a very large survey of sample households across the U.S. So we data mine that for information on household energy use and attributes. Yeah.
How do you integrate or planning to integrate with other platforms like Nextdoor?
So we have on our list of things to do to go and talk to Nextdoor. We would love to work with them on launching out to the neighborhoods that they're involved with. We haven't talked to them yet. We wanted to get a few communities launched and kind of get this up and running first. But yes, that would be fantastic. We want to look to integrate wherever we can. So one of the things that we do right now that we're going to be partnering with Utility API. So we took the time to integrate with PG&E for utility data here for the platform in the local area, but with other utilities across the U.S. it's much harder. PG&E has a third-party API available, but a lot of the other utilities in the U.S. don't. So Utility API is an example of a partner where we're going to be paying them for access to utility data for users across the U.S. Yeah.
It's awesome that you sort of acknowledge the people who are already at a very low consumption level, because I find sort of that's always been the bane of me entering these competitions. It's like I can't really save much more. So having that, but have you found that there sort of like mentoring is another sort of big behavioral driver? So these people who are already far along, incentivizing them to sort of be more active in those chat groups and things like that to help spur further change.
Exactly that. So we're asking our leaders in the community to go onto the action discussion and post some tips and tricks on the action discussion pages for some of the actions, getting their neighbor, inviting their neighbors to join. We're going to be adding in where folks, who invite neighbors and the neighbors sign up, they'll get points. So we're going to give them another way to get points. So there's all sorts of ways to engage leaders. I mean, that is the strategy for this platform, is to leverage existing social networks. You get the leaders in the community on board, you get them excited about it, you get them to let people know about it, and then also leveraging existing social groups, like community groups in the neighborhood. That's the fastest way. That's a community organizing approach, and that's what's different about what we're doing. We're bringing community organizing in with social engagement tools and combining that together. So it's kind of like think Fitbit / Nextdoor for climate solutions. It's kind of a way to think about it. Yeah. Question? Yeah.
I don't know why this image popped in my head while you were talking about the idea of Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts all wearing green jackets as Earth Scouts and going door to door. Have you thought of any way to monetize this for groups that might be encouraging people to do it? Like utilities, for instance, are obviously incentivized for these programs. They have these large rebates. If you had to be going door to door and encouraging people to join, is there a portion of that that you could get?
So that's a really good question, and actually it's interesting you bring up the Boy Scouts because we actually were connected with the Boy Scouts a few months ago, and they're interested in launching this out to all of their troops across the U.S. and combining it with their sustainability badge, which lines up extremely well to our site. The action list is almost identical. So yeah, and we've talked about instead of doing like having the Girl Scouts, instead of doing the cookies, they could go around and they could sell like LED light bulbs, right? So we've tossed those ideas around. So monetizing it, right now we're doing it at the city level, and so cities kind of choose how to run their program. They decide what challenges they want to do. If they want to monetize it, they can do that maybe with a local business. But we're actually gearing up for a national launch, and as we do that, we're going to be looking to see if we can do some sort of monetization programming with some larger real retailers. So that's on the table. That's a great idea.
Yeah, this whole thing looks really awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Do you have a question?
Do you guys track the actual savings versus the projected?
So we don't yet, but we're planning on doing that. So if we can get a utility link in for their data, we do that right now just as a one-time fee to establish a baseline and benchmark for the actions. But we actually are planning to link it in so that we can get kind of a regular feed and we can track their progress and see if it matches with their actions. So that's planned. Right now, in terms of accountability for actions, we're asking them to post a photo. So if there's a challenge running and they're going to actually get a prize, we may ask them to verify with photos or something like that. Yeah.
Are you doing anything like talking to various solar providers in the areas you're in to try to make it so that if somebody had a like Go Solar as their list, you would be a good source for potential sources of solar? That's
what the marketplace is all about. That's what we're actually working on right now. So for all of the actions that have a product or service that's important, we're going to be creating a marketplace, and we're going to be doing that in a way that allows local vendors to participate. And it'll be kind of like an Amazon affiliate marketplace model where we'll have a small 3-5% or whatever, small commission, and then they'll have access to users.
Are you going to do anything to vet the people who take part in that marketplace?
Absolutely. We're having conversations about that right now on how we can create that model in order to make sure that folks participating are providing a quality service. I know it's a real issue. I've talked to a number of people that work in the PACE programs, and they've run into this huge problem with having providers participate in the PACE program and having real problems with some providers, and yet because of the nature of the program, they've had a hard time sort of meeting. So Amazon has actually done a lot of work on that. They are on the cutting edge of sort of really watching their vendors very closely. I mean, if you're an Amazon provider or vendor, and you screw up with a couple customers, you get bounced.
It works really well for hardware, not so well for services.
Yeah. Well, so we're working on it though. It's really important to us to make sure that we're providing good quality services to our site.
One more question.
Yeah.
No. We have time for one more.
Yeah.
So I really like it. It's a wonderful system.
Thank you.
And so I just wonder, so you provide the platform, but the city manages it, or is this how it works? Because I mean, I wonder if you can just roll it out to, all cities.
So we are going to be rolling this out nationally relatively soon, and so we're going to be running it in places where we don't have cities engaged or an anchoring organization. For the sake of the climate, we can't wait for cities to do this one at a time. We just don't have that kind of time. So, but where we do have an anchoring organization, that's better because it's not in the cost model from a SaaS platform standpoint for us to be doing local engagement and all across the U.S. I mean, that's just not realistic. So what we look for is we look for organizations, and it could be city staff. In some cities, most of the cities we're launching now, it's city staff that we work with. But in a number of the communities, it's community-based organizations that are actually, excuse me, established community-based organizations that are working with us, that are actually paying us for the platform, and they're going to run the engagement. They already have developed engagement in the community around sustainability, and this is a part of it. They're adding to expand their services out. So we find that actually a partnership between the city and a community-based organization to deploy it locally is the best combination, because really having both, the city is really good at some parts of it, and then community-based organizations are really good at some more of the outreach and engagement part. So having both of those on the ground is really helpful. And then we're going to be working with organizing strategies that we can deploy as we launch out to more cities where we don't have an anchoring organization. So we're going to be just putting all of the best practices of organizing into this and seeing where we can get traction and how we can get as many folks as possible engaged.
How about in the corporate world?
Excuse me, what?
In the corporate world, not cities, corporations.
So cities are the hardest because when you try and organize in a city, you don't have an email list for everyone, right? You just don't have everyone's email list, you don't know them all. When you're working with cities and national organizations like the Boy Scouts, or we've also been contacted by the Episcopal Church, they're interested in maybe deploying their congregations nationally. When you have an organization like that, it's so much easier to engage folks because you have all their emails, you know how to contact them. There are leaders within the church, whether it be in a company or with a nonprofit, like a faith community. There's leaders within that can lead it with the membership or the employees. So there's it's much easier to do engagement in those circumstances. The cities are the hardest ones, but they're also a huge opportunity right now because there's so much interest. There's political will, there's commitment, and there's community support for these carbon goals at the local level. So we wanted to take that on. The city is the most challenging model, but we wanted to deploy there first and really take that on and see what we could achieve.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, the fun fact about Laurel that I failed to say earlier is that she was a Peace Corps volunteer living in the Ecuadorian Amazon for 2 years, and then she bicycled back from Ecuador to Oakland, and the Global Footprint Network was so impressed with her near zero footprint. That's how she got the job. No, that's a lie. But she did work for the Peace Corps. She did work for the Peace Corps, and she was a volunteer for 2 years in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And she probably flew back.
You make me sound so much cooler than I actually am. That's you're killing me here, man. But thank you for the lovely introduction. I don't know if I need a mic. It's pretty, I'm loud.
For the video.
Yeah.
For the video, okay.
Or just a
So
lot
this
of
one doesn't work.
It works.
Alright. Alright. Hopefully I won't knock anything over and break everything. Good.
Those pin-on mics work better the closer they are.
So this one should be good. How do I sound? Is that good?
Perfect.
You guys sound okay? Alright. There. Alright. You guys all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even with my scratchy voice? I have to apologize. I'm getting over a cold, so I sound a little like Terry or something. Thank you guys so much for having me. This is really interesting. It's lovely to see meetups like this, and I feel like the work that you guys are doing is super important. Also really nice to see some familiar faces, and I am extraordinarily pleased that you guys put me in touch with Lisa, because I feel like the work that you guys are doing is awesome, and I would love to talk to you more about partnerships and working together, because I think that it's the connect. There was so much of what you just said that resonated so much with the things that we've learned in our experience working in sustainability in communities that I think it's fantastic to see all the stuff that's coming out of that. So I'm actually here today not to talk to you about my company, but about my nonprofit. So I work for an organization called Global Footprint Network. And actually, how many of you have heard of Global Footprint Network? Oh wow, that's more than usual. How many of you have heard of the ecological footprint? Okay. How about Earth Overshoot Day? Anybody heard of it? Okay, so a few of you. How many of you have calculated your footprint using a footprint calculator? Man, you guys are amazing. How many of you have calculated your footprint using our footprint calculator in the last 9 months?
Last 24 hours?
Okay. Okay, different line of questioning. How many of you work for a startup? Is it, maybe, I think it's just all the same people. How many of you just raising your hands all the time? How many of you are founders? See, you guys are all just raising your hands. Okay, got it. All right, glad that I asked a whole bunch of questions that you could answer easily. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the work that we do, but I'm focusing on how we rebuilt our ecological footprint calculator last year, or how our sustainability nonprofit kind of turned into a sustainability tech startup. Hopefully this will all be relevant to you. So if everyone on the planet lived like the average person in the US, how many planets would we need?
6.7.
6.7? That's actually a little higher.
Yeah,
Any other guesses?
7 point something.
Five Earths.
Five Earths. Somebody did their homework. Or peeked ahead in the slides.
I peeked ahead.
So if everyone on the planet lived the way the average U.S. person, resident of the U.S. lived, we would need 5 Earths. And we know this because we can calculate that. It's magical. And the way that you have already discovered is that you can calculate that using an ecological footprint calculator. And I'm going to tell you how that works and give you a quick insight into the process that we went to revamping that. But before I do, I'm actually going to give you a little mini walkthrough of how we develop this data, how we come to find this information and produce it in a way. Oops, sorry about that.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. In a way that is easily communicated to large groups of people, whether or not they know the difference between parts per million or CO2 equivalents or metric tons of anything, for that matter, into things like Earths, which people are familiar with. Oh, and it's over. So I'm going to give you a little footprint 101 and some of the basic principles behind that. So the first is Earth is finite. I think that's something we can all agree on. There's just one, and until Elon Musk figures out how to terraform Mars, it's the only one we've got. And footprint is based on 2 basic sustainability: waste assimilation to exceed waste production. And it seems like this is just physics, but somehow economists don't totally understand that sometimes. And the other basic principle in footprint is that all of human consumption, all consumption activities, can actually be mapped onto bioproductive surface area on the planet, and not all of those bioproductive areas are created equal. So basically, we have this one planet, and then everything we wear, everything we eat, everything we emit into the atmosphere has to come from surface area. And if you take the whole planet and you leave out the areas that are like deep tundra in the middle of the Sahara, there's about 12 billion hectares of biologically productive space. And that has to provide for all 7 billion plus of us, right? And the neat thing is we can just do a little math to figure out how much space it takes to provide all of those goods and waste assimilation that's required for each one of us. So we say, okay, if we take, if you eat a cow, you know how many hectares of land are required to produce said cow, and then we do a little math, and we can normalize that for different things. And by doing a little bit more math, we can compare 1 hectare to another in an average way, so we call it a global hectare, and this gives us a common unit. And because I am assuming that you're data geeks like me, common units are very handy for being able to add and subtract. So now that we're all on the same page.
Speaking of common unit, can you define a hectare for people? Or what is it numerically?
Yes. In American, I think it's 2.47. 2.5. All right. Should know that. I work in all hectares, so I apologize for
acres. So
good
2.5 acres.
2.5 acres. All right. So the ecological footprint then is actually split up into various different land types. So we look at
how much space, but we break it up into different kinds of land so that we can acknowledge that some parts of the planet are more useful to us than others, and provide different services to us. So we look at fishing grounds, we look at built-up land, we look at grazing land, obviously cropland, forest products, and we have, and obviously like our carbon footprint. And carbon footprint and forests actually occupy the same kind of space because forests are our best land area availability to sequester carbon. And so using those, we actually have ecological footprint accounting. So what this is we are using basic accounting methods to measure our resource metabolism, essentially. How much supply and demand, how much is coming in, how much is going out in terms of our consumption of goods from the planet, and how much planet is required to absorb the carbon that we are emitting into the atmosphere. So on the supply side, we call that biocapacity, biological capacity. And on the demand side, it's ecological footprint. So in these pictures, you can kind of see biocapacity would be the forest, would be the trees, the forest products, and ecological footprint would be the forest products that we are taking. All seems really simple and easy, straightforward stuff, right? Easy peasy. Okay, so that is ecological footprint, the concept. And as a pure concept, this is actually created by my boss, Matas Bakanago, along with his dissertation advisor, Bill Reese, and they came up with this in the early 1990s. And essentially his dissertation project was coming up with the concept of ecological footprint. And Matas founded our organization in 2003 to advance sort of the practice of it, the application of this concept in a way that allows us to actually do these calculations so that they can be used in decision making and to inform how we're impacting the planet. And so the primary way that we do that as an organization is through the national footprint accounts. So the national footprint accounts is this very large data set that we produce on an annual basis. And essentially what we're doing is we're taking massive amounts of production and trade data from mostly United Nations sources like the FAO, Comtrade, and other big statistics organizations, but we're also using IEA, we're using and some various sort of like source data, FishStat, things like that. So big data sets, and pulling all that data together to come up with the ecological footprint and biocapacity values for a time series. And we do that for all countries, going back to 1961, because that's when our data, when all complete data sets are available for. And we also, so we aggregate to regions and we do calculations for the entire world, which is how we can come up with Earth overshoot day and say that on X day of the year, we have used up all of the resources that will be regenerated over 12 years' time. So the national footprint accounts are now available, and the 2018 edition was just launched last week, as available on an open data platform. So last year, after several years of our research team, myself included, very much trying to get the open data platform up and running, we finally got the go-ahead to stop just licensing data and make this available to everyone. So you can go to data.footprintnetwork.org and you can download any of this information. And it's fantastic because it's tons and tons of information. And it's really fascinating to dig through, and this is a total other presentation, maybe some other bump, but it's a really fantastic website, and it's something that I feel very connected to. I got the opportunity to sort of lead that project and push that into the world, and it's something that I feel really strongly, it's important that it exists for people to get into, and that it's not behind a paywall or behind any barriers to getting into this. So I really encourage you, if you have the opportunity, please go check out the data and dig into it. There's some cool visualizations. We're always looking for people to do other cool visualizations. So if you're into data viz and you want to try out some data, I encourage you to check it out. But that's where the national footprint accounts are available for the world to use. But that's not the only way that we produce and provide data. We've partnered for a very long time with WWF, World Wildlife Foundation, for doing their Living Planet reports. This is not actually from the Living Planet report, this is from our website, but what we've done with them is they put footprint on the map by looking at ecological footprint as a way to see how humans are having an impact from a conservation perspective, and acknowledging the aspects of our consumption and how it affects other species. So a lot of what we talk about is talking about what's available for us, but there are other species out there as well. One of the cool things we do, and since you guys are all like super up on your ecological footprint stuff already, I can go into some detailed stuff for you, is we take all of that information that we get from the national footprint accounts and we combine it with bilateral trade data from GTAB, so we can create consumption land use matrices. In this consumption land use matrix, we take the national footprint account data, we pull out just the production portion, and then we combine that with an environmentally extended multi-regional input-output model. And by doing that, we can come up with this matrix where we have demand categories on one side and land use on the other. So you can look at footprint by demand. And this is actually the portion of the work that we do that allows us to do things like subnational calculations, city calculations, and importantly for the footprint calculator, individual calculations. So as an organization, our goal, our overriding mission is to make ecological limits central to decision making, and providing this data and various. And you can see a couple of the ones we've worked with up here. So we worked with the UAE. They actually came to us when they saw in the Living Planet report that they were the top in terms of ecological footprint per person, and they said, hey, what do we do about this? This makes us look bad. And actually at the time, we said, okay, well, let's do a review of your consumption. And they said, well, okay, well, how do we do that? And we're like, well, you go to your statistics agency and you pull all this information about consumption. And they're like, well, we don't have a stats agency. So the statistics agency in the UAE was actually created as part of a project that they started with us. And it's been interesting working with them since, and they've done actually a fair amount of work. Their footprint is still very, very high, but they've done a lot of work to reduce their carbon footprint especially. We've also worked with Ecuador, which is one of the cool things that was exciting for me coming as a Peace Corps volunteer who was formerly in Ecuador. They actually, so we were speaking with some folks from the Ecuadorian Ministry of Environment, and they were looking at some of the data, and they said, why are you putting this out there? Are you're saying that this is the right to, what about the right to development? What about the derecho de desarrollo? And if you look at the Ecuadorian footprint, over time, the footprint per person has not increased, but the total footprint of the country has gotten dangerously close to exceeding the available biocapacity of the country, which is pretty extraordinary because Ecuador has incredible natural resources, and that its population, it would be coming close to that sort of edge is kind of scary. And so when speaking to them, we said, well, no, this isn't the right to development. What you guys are looking at is the right to collapse, and derecho desastro, So what they did is they actually started a whole division of their Ministry of the Environment dedicated to calculating ecological footprint. And now they calculate it themselves every year, every 2 years, to look at how footprint is, the trajectory in their country. Also up here we have Switzerland, where I think a year and a half ago they held a vote to see if they wanted to live within one planet by 2050, which was the first of its kind. It would have been a constitutional amendment to look at to take one planet living into account as a way to measure progress towards sustainability. Unfortunately, they believe they should live on 4 planets, which is disappointing for us. But 36% of the population did vote for that amendment, which is it was a really interesting thing and amazing that it even got onto the ballot. And also, we are currently just launching a big project with 7 cities in Portugal, where they're using our data to actually make decision making in terms of funding allocation. So we've also been using sustainability framing, so linking local resource use to national resource use, and also in monitoring sustainable development, so using ecological footprint alongside other indicators such as the Human Development Index to assess how well we're doing at the country level and subnational level to get towards high standards of living while trying to achieve a lower footprint than is one that's replicable worldwide. And the most recent sort of big push that we've had is in cities, because as we all know, population is growing significantly, and most of the world will be living in cities over the next few decades. And so we believe strongly that the battle for sustainability will be won or lost in these spaces. And the work that's being done in infrastructure and building right now are things that need to take that into account for us to really be able to achieve the goals set out by the Paris Agreement and by the SDGs. If we are in any way capable of hitting any of those targets, the things that are being built yesterday need to be aligned with getting out of carbon and need to be aligned with really electrifying everything. So, the other big way that we engage with the world is through our calculator. Does anybody recognize this calculator? Yes, somebody, yes, great. So these are some shots from our old footprint calculator. It was fun. You got to pick out an avatar. It was super immersive, and it was in Flash.
I remember that.
Oh, Flash. Remember Flash?
Yeah.
So it turns out Flash isn't great for mobile. Also, we built this like 10 years ago. So, what about their Ecological Footprint Explorer? What are we going to do next? Maybe we should turn to this 10-year-old Flash calculator that we've been having hidden on our website for the last few years and do something about it. So, we did. So I'm going to give you a quick timeline of how this ran down. And you guys will appreciate this because you work in tech and you understand these things. So this is actually fun for me to talk to people who I can understand this, because a lot of the time I end up speaking at, I don't know, like companies or agencies where people have never heard of an API, or, I mean, did anybody see any of the testimony
I
yesterday?
listened to some of it. It was terrifying.
People do not understand the internets at all. So last April, we launched our open data platform. And then just over a month later, we decided, let's do it. Let's rebuild this calculator. So we started product validation. We had our first development review at the beginning of June. We started setting up backend on June 12th. We had our first design review a couple days later. About a month later, and then we went full development. A month later, we started QA. And at the end of the month, we launched a brand new calculator. Yeah, that's the part you want. Especially because we're a nonprofit and we don't actually have any developers on staff. Come on, people, be impressed by this.
That's actually really
That's amazing! Come on, you were right here. And then August 2nd was Earth Overshoot Day. And the big push behind trying to get it out before then is because we had to do a big media campaign on August 2nd, or last year it was August 2nd. It'll be a different date this year, not yet announced. So we had, we had got into 200, into newspapers in 200 countries, 1.5 billion media impressions. We were on the front page of 5 newspapers in France. The minister of the environmental transition in France actually spoke to Congress and referred to our work. It was massive. And we had just under the wire gotten our calculator up and running. So on August 5th, we had our first 100,000 visitors. And then by September 27th, we had our first 500,000. So, yeah. It was was an extraordinary process. We worked with Free Range Studios, who is partly based here in the Bay Area, who also helped us do our Flash version 10 years ago. And it was a really crazy process, and I don't need to tell any of you who work in this space how intense that was. But we're really excited about what came out of it, and have been really excited that it's now on mobile. And unfortunately, you know, this is I think we still have beta up on our website because there are several things that we're still refining, still trying to fix, and for this version that we launched, we wanted to make sure it got out there, so we just did it in English. So we're excited to be translating into French, Spanish, Chinese, and Hindi over the next 3 or 4 months, which is very exciting, and it expands our potential user base, quite a bit after we actually just get out of the U.S. and Europe. So at this point, 70% of the people who come and use the calculator are English in English-speaking countries, which is sort of not that normal for us compared to a lot of where our reach is. As a global network, we actually are much better known in different parts of the world. We've had much greater penetration in terms of visibility in Asia, in Europe, and even in South America. Excuse me. We had some webinars last week and the week before that, and we had people who were like, "Hi, calling in from Ghana and New Zealand and the Netherlands," and so it's been interesting to look forward to the languages coming up, because I think that'll be really exciting in terms of how many people we can reach with this work. So, I guess you guys already know this since you've already calculated your footprint already, but if you haven't yet, you can actually do it on your phone now, as you couldn't before. But please check it out. We're really proud of what's come out of it, and if you have feedback or suggestions, please let me know. I'm happy to take that and pass it along to our developers. So through that crazy process, and through the process of being, being in a nonprofit that's trying to talk about long-term decision-making and sort of difficult sustainability topics at a time when it's really easy to be focused on the many very immediate, in front of your face sort of issues that we all face living in the Bay Area and being part of this country and living in a crazy world. So I wanted to share some of the things that I've kind of had a chance to learn, and they apply sort of at multiple levels. The first is that focus and decision making are the keys to change and productivity, and this seems like it shouldn't be a lesson learned, seems like this should be pretty obvious, but we had been talking about doing this calculator upgrade for years. But it took a really long time to even consider the idea of highlighting the footprint calculator, much less redoing it. And part of the reason behind that was because as a tool, it can be kind of disempowering to find out at the end that you have a very large footprint. And because of that, there's sort of this gap between sort of this emotion that you feel when you learn something about yourself and sort of the kind of positivity that we would like to put into the world and helping people feel like they have an opportunity to do good things. So it was a little bit hidden. So actually, we spent a really long time just convincing ourselves that this was a good thing. The thing that really was the tipping point, though, is that even with our old Flash ridiculous calculator, even with all of that, we were still getting about 2 million people a year come and take the calculator on our website. And it didn't even work on your phone, like that's crazy. But a lot of that are students, and because we recognize that this is a tool that's being used and it helps communicate a somewhat complicated thing in an easy way, we were missing an opportunity. So as soon as that happened, we had this extraordinary run of, okay, let's do this. We got 3 months, we got to knock this out. And it was fantastic. It was amazing how much got in there. But I think that same lesson can actually be applied in the sustainability sector. So we all know that nothing's moving fast enough. And I really think that that focus and decision making is how we overcome that. Because what we've so within a degree or a year or 10 years to know that we aren't moving fast enough. And this guesstimate is probably much more valuable than spending years and years working on, you know, like, okay, well, if it's the conservative one, or if it's the positive one, you know, you're looking at these curves, you're looking at these wedges that they all like to put up there. Thing is, we're not moving fast enough, and we don't need a whole lot of data to tell us that. We need a baseline. So, focus, decision making. It's the way to go. All right. Also, and I love that you said this, Lisa, it is not enough to give people information. People need more than that. I am a data geek. I look at these numbers, I look at our footprint, you know, the national footprint accounts, and I'm like, well, it's obvious, it's all there. Can't you see the lines and the numbers and the graph? Like, what is there else to learn? And what we know for sure is that that is not enough. So you have folks like Preston Stokeness who've done all of this interesting work around climate communication and psychology, essentially. And it's so important that there are things to go, that what comes next, right? There's always the what next. So you finish the calculator and you have this explore solutions button at the bottom. But really, this is where it's so important for us as a small organization to partner with organizations that are doing, you know, all of that work. So we do the data, and then we look for organizations who are working on the ground, who have like those direct opportunities to do action, and we find ways to connect those dots. And the last thing I'm going to share in terms of a lesson that I learned through this is that people cannot imagine what people cannot imagine. And that sounds cryptic, but here's the thing. So I don't know if you guys remember this Time cover that came out, I think it was last year, and it says, what does it say? It says, "Dear Washington, we need to rebuild. Can you get your act together?" And on it is a whole bunch of traditional infrastructure. You have roads, you have airplanes, you have shipping containers and canals, and even in an article that's saying we need to move faster, we need to do more, there's an image that replicates the old. And so in spaces that we work in, we need to show each other, show the world the opportunities. And this is where it's so important to be able to have this inspirational, these cool projects, this development, and have organizations and companies that are doing that really innovative stuff be broadcast and highlighted so that we can see that it happens. It's why it's exciting to have things like Drawdown. It's why it's exciting to see you know, what Buckminster Fuller Institute is doing and the organizations that they fund. But I think the other interesting thing on a more personal level in terms of what people cannot imagine, what they can imagine, is that even within my own organization, our founder had to see a prototype to realize how powerful it could be to do this upgrade. And I think that's an interesting lesson too, that this works at different scales. You know, if we're talking to if we're talking to funders, if we're talking to clients, if we're talking to other potential partners, being able to show what is there and how it's possible is so key in being able to tell that message or share that message and move forward. So those are the things that I learned. You guys seem pretty cool, so I'd love it if we could stay in touch. Thank you so much.
One quick comment on your old flash calculator, and I don't know how many other people did this, but I know that you were, I know that you were saying that it was just like an endpoint and it could be a bit depressing. One of the things I know I used it for, and I encouraged anybody who played with it, was you could toggle you could make different choices and see, and like I was like interested enough that I nerded out and was like, okay, how many times do I have to take this in order to get it down to where, and like whatever. So you had, it was a pretty interactive little.
That is a nice aspect, yes. I agree. No, I definitely, understanding what goes into your footprint is how you could make those changes is something that being able to sort of move the sliders and move back and forth in between the questions and kind of understand that is an empowering thing. So I think that's one thing that we found is actually teachers and professors do that a lot with their students. They say, okay, take it, and then go back and see what you can do. Like, how can you make changes? Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you have this data set and you basically want to let other people build off of that.
Correct.
And with this project, you built your own app off of that, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
Are you going to continue to do that, or are you going to basically use this as your showcase example of what you can do with it, and that will hopefully encourage other people to do stuff, or do you want to continue to add to the suite?
So right now, that's a good question. So right now, the footprint calculator, individual footprint calculator, is on a different API than our open data platform.
Okay.
So the open data platform provides all of our national level data, and the individual footprint calculator provides consumption land use matrix data that can be essentially scaled based on how you choose, so how you answer the questions. That API isn't open at this point, and what we're doing in terms of sharing it is we have an iframe, we have the potential to customize and embed, and we would like to work with folks to actually do custom versions of the calculator so that it can be drawing from local data, it can be sort of integrated with other projects. So since it's such a great engagement tool, working with folks who have like climate action plans and want more of the people in their community to pay attention to it is sort of a nice entry to that, and then it's sort of a nice launch pad for things like lists of solutions and activities that you can do as an individual, or as a household, or as a community. But in terms of building off the calculator API, we don't have any near-term plans for that, but I think it's something that we would be open to with the right partners. Yeah.
Yeah, the infrastructure piece on getting to 2050 with like efficient, what are some of y'all's tips for countries and cities to start planning that way?
So we talk about 4 main pillars of sustainability that are kind of what we rely on. The first is where our energy comes from. So obviously the infrastructure behind clean energy grids, microgrids, sort of moving away from a fossil fuel-based system. So energy, one is transportation, obviously, how our cities, or how all of our all of transportation is done. So moving to EV, providing more public transportation, making it easier to be a biker, all of that. How our cities are put together, so cities and transportation, that one. Where our food comes from is another big one. So there's a lot of energy and consumption that's in the food, where our food comes from. So part of that is what we eat, and part of it is where it comes from on the services provision side and sort of social side, and that's population. So you can't talk about sustainability for too long without starting to talk about population, and recognizing that the more there are of us, the less planet there is for each of us. And so really supporting efforts towards women's empowerment, education, access to all kinds of planning, access to our family planning, and different kinds of opportunities there. So we also, that's sort of the non-infrastructure part of that, but I think is important to include, because I think that's something that we would be remiss not to talk about. Yes, and yes.
Just related to the last question, very interesting stuff. In fact, we just finished a study looking at the embodied carbon in internationally traded goods. So probably use kind of similar methodology using a MRIO method.
Yeah.
So one of the big problems is often countries, they report the greenhouse gas emission that happens inside the country, and in the accounting so far internationally, the embodied carbon often missing, which is basically carbon withdrawal. And our analysis showed 25% of the entire greenhouse gas emissions embodied in the goods that are traded internationally. So I think one place to start would be countries to look at consumption-based methodology. It's basically the stuff you're doing. So they will be accounted for. Like, just give an example, between US and China trade, US imports over 500 million tons of CO2 from China. And we export like 16 million tons. So net import from China is around 440 million tons, which is exactly equal to the entire emission that California has in 2015. California is 6,000 tons, just the import from China. So until we really account for that and trying to tackle that emission, we are going to miss a big chunk of emission. So we definitely need to
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually sort of a unique space that we occupy in terms of being a consumption-based model.
Yeah.
So we do calculate footprint production, but we also, everything is also in consumption. So for those of you who are not sort of in that space necessarily, consumption, not their production. And it's interesting because increasingly cities are interested in calculating consumption rather than production too. And so it's interesting to be able to take advantage of the tools that we have and sort of meet some of those, like looking forward, this is where that the science is going and something that's really important to consider. So yeah, let's talk. Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at countries that are moving either toward or away from sustainability data centers, have you seen any interesting comparisons to other indices like mortality, health, well-being, happiness? Is there anything that stood out for countries that are moving in your direction that you saw?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that because that's one of the things that I think is most interesting for me. I mentioned this to a few folks earlier, but I have a background in international development, and so looking at well-being is a big part of stuff that I've been interested in for a long time. One of the things that we do is we look at Human Development Index against ecological footprint, and essentially what you find, and I'm going to go back to this tiny graph that you're not going to be able to see, but I'm going to point to it anyway. Oh, so many plots. There we go. There. Okay. So you guys, these nice big screens you can see kind of well. So down here along the bottom is Human Development Index, which is a measure of so longevity, education, and GNI. And then up here we have ecological footprint per capita. And what we see with this cloud of dots, which represent countries, is sort of the traditional development paradigm, where as well-being increases or as HDI or GDP increases, footprint also increases. So it's a very sort of predictable curve. And so ideally, sustainability is that you move into this sort of sustainable development quadrant where you will have a low footprint per capita, but also higher HDI. What's interesting is if you do this same plot and you look at happiness index along the bottom instead of HDI and keep footprint per capita on the side, the cloud kind of moves like this. So it's like this way, and it doesn't follow that that same sort of traditional development paradigm that we're familiar with. So there's some cool visualizations on that too. Yes.
So over the next 100 years, do you expect the bottom area to move to the right, or do you expect the top area to move down first? Like who do you see as the early adopters of these?
So actually, if you look at the last 20, 30 years, which is how long we have HDI data for, and actually on our data.footprintnetwork.org, you can see sort of a Gapminder style animation of this. This cloud moves to the right and up, right? And we see that. But as you're alluding to, there's only so much of that can happen before we collapse, right? So I'm sort of this hopeful, optimistic mindset that this will come down and this will come this way. That's my hope, because I think that some of the trends that we're seeing, and in fact, the per person ecological footprint for 2014 was actually a little bit, it's flat from 2013 based on our data. So maybe there's some reversal there. That said, we live in the world that we do, and it's kind of scary to see people not paying attention to some of this information. So I mean, there's one way or another. My boss always says, we're going to reach sustainability, whether it's through disaster or through design. We would like it to be through design. So I guess that's where you guys come in. So go design it. Go design the sustainable beach.
On that note, I think that's a really great disaster design. To officially end presentation, if you want to keep asking questions, we can have Lisa and Laurel come up here and we can keep firing at them, or we can have more pizza and just talk informally and do that. Let's see. I've seen more nods for the second round, so okay, more pizza. Thank you so much. All right, see you next month. Thank you.
Or next week.
Or next week. Or in 2 days.
Not bad, how are you?